This is the Vanguard interview series. I'm your host, Gavin, and we're having conversations with activists, candidates, and people on the vanguard of American politics. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss our new interview and so that you can also stay in the loop of Vanguard leftist politics. Today we're welcoming to the show Deepti Sharma, candidate for City Council in New York City's 24th District, and also the founder of a couple of companies, including Food to Eat. How's it going this morning?
Good. It's just, it's Deepti Sharma, but it's going good. I feel like nowadays it's always a loaded question whenever you ask someone, how are you? But I think all things considering, I'm doing okay.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it looks like you have a great platform on your website detailing your vision for the city council seat and what you would the causes you would hope to advance if you win your election. Could you just maybe spell out your vision a little bit for those who are watching? What you would do if elected, how your leadership might be different than what the 24th district currently has going for it, and just maybe contrast yourself with some of the other candidates running.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our campaign, first of all, is taking, the stance to be able to be, well, let me take it a step back. I've always been a person who wants to serve my community, right? And that stemmed from my experience in middle school, where community service was literally a part of our curriculum. So every week, from the grades of fifth to eighth, we were going and spending time with preschoolers, kindergartners in different schools within our community. So community service has been embedded in me from a young age. And it's the same approach that I'm taking with my campaign, which is making sure that we're a resource for people. So when we're calling people, the first thing we do is ask them, how are you doing and what can we do for you? Because at the end of the day, it's not about publicity. It's not about, being the one that gets the most press. It's about who's going to do the job and who's going to actually listen to their constituents and get the things that they need done. So that's the same approach that I've been taking for my company. And it's just making sure that, I mean, not my company, sorry, our campaign. I'm so used to being an entrepreneur that it's a small business owner. The company is the first word I use. But so for us, the most important thing is being resource oriented, which is why we launched a resource center page on our website to make sure that people can log on and let us know if there's issues that our campaign and our team can actually help them out with.
Awesome.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you're good.
I was just going to say, but when it comes to the issues that are most important to us right now, we're thinking about a few things, right? We're thinking about how can we provide economic relief. Right now, we want to make sure that everyone that is working is getting paid a fair wage, right? So $15 an hour is just the start. In my eyes, $15 is not enough because $15 is supposed to be something that you're supposed to use to pay rent, food, transportation, and in a lot of cases, also rent. I mean, in a lot of cases, that's supposed to also be childcare. So, in what world are you supposed to think about having a quality of life in which you can actually go and take a vacation with your family? So, for me, economic relief is really important, especially as we are noticing and witnessing lots of job loss. We're currently in the middle of a housing crisis. Every night when I'm phone banking, talking to constituents, what I keep hearing is that this district is unaffordable. We're still seeing that, a 2-bedroom apartment for a family of two or four is definitely not enough. And if you think about the cost, it's just increasingly rising. So affordability doesn't exist. People are losing their jobs and are being evicted. And so rent relief is also something that the city council, we can't wait for the city council to do this next year. We need them to take action right now, especially with, the eviction moratoriums being lifted. And, we need to extend that instead of lifting them. So I think those are the things that I keep thinking about. But as someone that was born in this district, that grew up in this district, I feel like a lot of the things that I'm dealing with as a parent are the same things my mom was dealing with, right? Which is trying to find proper, affordable childcare, trying to find enrichment programs for me to go to after school, not just a place for me to sit and do my homework and someone to, watch over me, but for me to actually take something that was going to enhance my experience as a child, right? Taking taekwondo or gymnastics or jazz, ballet, or those kinds of classes. My parents couldn't afford to put me in programs that were really expensive. And so when we had a community center that had these programs, it was life changing. And the fact that the funding for a lot of these programs is literally non existent is really important to me, right? Like we need to think about how we're going to, again, reinvest in our communities. It's not just about providing people with just bare minimum necessities. It's like, what can we do so that folks have an opportunity beyond just getting a basic education? We need them to flourish and to have these opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise. So for me, it's really looking at how do we change the status quo, allow this district to actually dream of more than just the basic stuff that they need. What do they want? And how do we create a quality of life in which they'll actually be excited to be a part of this community?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a wonderful vision, Deepti. And I was wondering if you plan on kind of courting or organizing along the same lines as other. We've seen a lot of progressives come out of New York City, whether it be AOC at the congressional level and Jamal Bowman. Also, in one of your neighboring districts, we have Tiffany Caban running for city council. Do you consider yourself of a similar mold of the progressive ideology? Are you, campaigning in a grassroots way, trying to use similar methods that candidates like those aforementioned candidates did to kind of reach people?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say I'm a progressive candidate. I don't necessarily love labels per se. I think it's really important to think about what are the things that the constituents and the community need and listening to them. You know, when I first started my company, the first thing I did was spend time listening and talking to food trucks and restaurants of New York City and ask them what did they need from a tech company that was going to build a product or service for them. And it goes to the same with building a campaign and running for office is being on the ground, talking to community leaders, talking to people that live here, talking to working family members, and people that are actually like dealing with the day-to-day issues here. So, again, that is the most important thing to me. And yeah, we're completely grassroots. We're about, we're making sure that we're not taking we're taking money from people, people that believe in us, small donors, people that live in the district, people that actually believe in the work that we're doing. And that's like the most important thing to me, is focusing on the people that live here first.
Absolutely. I also noticed that you're the founder of a couple of companies that you've mentioned. Could you maybe just talk about the experience you've gained through operating some small businesses? And in particular, I was really impressed by the vision or what it says, at least on the Twitter page for your company, Food to Eat, where it says you're the ultimate destination for local catered food experiences from New York City immigrant, women, and minority-owned restaurants. Could you maybe just speak a little bit about that business and maybe how it's helped some of these immigrant women and minority owned restaurants? Obviously, in New York City, like so many cities around the country, we see an increasing amount of corporatized, restaurants, chain restaurants kind of taking the place of your classic New York City pizzerias, stuff like that. We obviously see it here in Kansas City too, where I live, and the coronavirus pandemic has only made things so much worse in that sense, where we just basically see corporations coming in to pick up, where all the local businesses have failed because they obviously have enough money to, sustain themselves in these times, whereas so many mom and pop restaurants and of course so many immigrant women and minority owned restaurants just can't make it during these times with no assistance from their government. So
Yeah.
what have
I
you seen?
mean, Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So the interesting thing is that it's literally taken a pandemic for people to realize that third-party services like Uber Eats, Seamless, Grubhub are not actually partners to restaurants, but restaurants don't actually like them, right? Because they have been taking ridiculously high fees from them from the get-go. And the other thing I want to point out is none of these companies actually started because they wanted to help gig workers or they wanted to help restaurants have more opportunities for more business. The reason why they started Seamless, for example, one of the first companies that started online ordering, started because they wanted to help lawyers have it easier to be able to order from restaurants because they didn't like having to pick up the phone and call them. That in itself shows you that a lot of these companies don't actually care or frankly give a f about what it takes to build these businesses. And that's why city council, again, only actually took action in the middle of a pandemic. So people are, listening to restaurant owners or small business owners during a pandemic, but they didn't for the last 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And so for me, when I started my first company, Food to Eat, it was with the intention of listening to vendors first, to listen to food truck owners, to listen to restaurant owners and ask them, what is it that you need? What are you dealing with? How can I help you? The same approach we're taking with our campaign, I did it from the get-go with our company, because if you don't build for those organizations first and you only think about the convenience of consumers, you're not going to build something that is going to be appreciated. You're not going to build something that your vendors are actually going to like. So for me, that was the approach first, is how can I take technology to help immigrant women and minority owned restaurants who are often overlooked, and create something where they can actually grow and scale their businesses to continue to create a beautiful community, right? So that they can actually create a place where people actually want to come in to work and be excited, and not just work at a big corporate, conglomerate company where there's no culture, there's no community, there's no character. I mean, that's what when I think about small businesses, I think about the fact that I can go into a shop, order my smoothie, coffee, or tea, and they know my order, and they know me, and they know something about me, and we're having these conversations, and they're switching up the menu because they're actually listening to the community and changing it up because they know what their communities want. Small businesses breed innovation as well, right? They breed entrepreneurship. They breed bringing in amazing jobs. So Food to Eat started with the premise of how do we help small business owners that are immigrant women minority to be able to grow and scale by using technology. We wanted to empower small businesses by helping them build a part of their business that they didn't have time to concentrate on. So we help them book more catering jobs at large corporate offices. So companies like Warby Parker, The Skim, or Microsoft were our clients. And what we would tell them is, not only are we going to help you book catering from small mom and pops, but we want to push the narrative of diversity and inclusion. It's not just about hiring, brown and black people and some women, and then you're done. We want you to actually use your purchasing power, invest in the local economy, buy from small businesses, because your duty is not just to the community within your four walls, it's also to businesses outside. If every single person coming into a building in the Empire State Building doesn't buy a single cup of coffee outside because they get everything for free inside, what is the small business outside going to do? How are they going to survive? And so that was a mentality that we were teaching them. We also started something called I Made Your Food, where we would photograph all of the chefs, owners holding signs that said I made your food, and those photographs would be delivered with the food. And the point of that was, how do we humanize food, right? We often forget when we're putting food in our mouth that somebody prepared this, right? And there was a person behind it. And oftentimes the back of house is brown or black, and they're always forgotten and they're never given credit. And so for me, we wanted there to be power in the photographs, but storytelling. So we then started doing fireside chats. When the Skim would have their Friday team lunches, we would bring in the owners or the chefs and host, host the fireside chat while people were eating, asking questions. Again, empowering small business owners that are always overlooked. Just because they didn't build, huge brands like David Chang doesn't mean that they don't have a powerful story or a powerful business. They're huge parts of their community, and they're one of the biggest reasons why I get so sad when I read lists like the New York Magazine just came out with like 500 businesses that are shut down. And I was deeply saddened by that. It was, people are saying, oh, this is beautiful. Like, yeah, what's crazy about it is you didn't pay attention to a single one of these businesses when they were successful, when they were actually growing and thriving. We're allowing them to just die. We're not holding our government accountable. Small businesses provide jobs. They provide jobs within local communities. Think about it. Somebody doesn't have to leave their community in Queens to now have to go all the way to Manhattan. We're also reducing the carbon footprint of these individuals so that they stay local. There's so many things that are associated with providing good jobs within a community. And that's something that's really important that I feel like I bring to the table, is that understanding of what is a small business, right? Right now, small businesses are defined by 500 people or less. How is that 500 people business the same as someone who's a small mom and pop restaurant with 10 people? They don't have the same scale. They don't have the same amount of revenue. And those are the things that I think that when we think about who's representing us in government, is that we need diversity, right? We need diversity not just in race, gender, ethnicity, but also in our experiences. We can't all just be a ton of organizers. We can't all just be a ton of lawyers or career politicians or whatever the case. We need people with diverse backgrounds that have done different things, that can breed different kind of great innovative solutions that are actually going to help push the narrative of working families. And we make sure that we create a proper safety net so that if somebody does have shitty rainy day, that there is someone here, and that being your government, here to actually help you through that, and making sure that childcare is affordable. All of these things, like, I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but it's just things that like are all connected that I think people forget about.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that a lot of those issues have been really laid bare by the pandemic, like we were just talking about. And when it comes to, how the government, especially in New York City, should respond to these things, something that recently was piquing my interest, that reports that former presidential candidate Andrew Yang actually might be considering a mayoral run in New York City, which I thought is a pretty exciting prospect. I have some problems with Yang's some of his ideas, but overall, I think he's a really interesting and for the most part, really progressive guy who has a lot of the right ideas, especially when it comes to the things that we're talking about. Putting money on the tables of families in need, people that need that money, businesses that are struggling. What's your opinion on like a guaranteed income type of a policy, especially in a city like New York City, where we do see just rampant inequality? We have Wall Street and then some of the poorest people in the country.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's a very interesting approach. I think it's something that does need to be taken seriously. I mean, recently there was a friend and mentor of mine, Rishma Sajani, who put out something where she said there should be a Marshall Plan for work for mothers, right? Where we give mothers, I think it's like $2,400 a month in order to, give them support and then relief, right? So I think it's similar to universal income, where we are giving a certain amount of support. So again, when it comes to a safety net, because things are unpredictable, right? We can't. This pandemic has been extremely unpredictable, but your leadership can do certain things in order to make sure that you are not at like the worst possible position in your life. They can help support, which they haven't been. If anything, we've just been in this constant pissing match between our mayor and our governor, or, federal versus local. And I think that that's where we need to shift attention in getting people to understand that local politics almost matters more than federal sometimes, and that like local politicians actually have a huge say in the budget. People keep asking me, what does city council, like intelligent people they're like, oh, I don't know what city council does, or like, how many city council members are there? And I've had to sit down and walk people through, like, what does city council do? We control the budget. That's like one of the biggest things, right? Controlling a budget for a city and having a say in how that budget is spent is really essential. And how like zoning happens, where developments are able to be able to create it, and this and that. And I think that that is really necessary, is that we take the stance of getting more people involved in local politics, right? Which is why I'm doing as much as I can to talk about my journey. People don't even know how hard it is to even get your name on the ballot. That was something so simple that I talked about, being like, I have to go out, I have to get signatures in the middle of a pandemic. When it isn't the safest thing to do, I'm still having to go do that, right? It's so hard to just take the first necessary steps to get yourself in a certain position to be able to run for office. So I think being transparent about the process of government and what it means is really important. It's not just about screaming at the wall, but it's like just showing people this is what it takes to be involved. This is what it takes in order for us to get from point A to point B. And this is what diplomacy looks like. And because it sometimes isn't the sexiest process, but it's the most important process to be able to help the people that need it the most.
Yeah, 100%. One other thing I wanted to ask you about, and I think that you made an excellent point by pointing out that city council members have a lot of sway over the budget. What's your opinion on the defund the police movement? What do you think about the police budget in your district or in Queens in general? And what do you think about reallocating some of those resources into other social services?
Well, I think it's really essential that we think about what is the NYPD's involvement in most situations, right? I think, like, I was talking to a student that goes to Queens College when I was out petitioning, and we were talking about defund the police and shifting of the budget and how important it is. And one of his experiences was really interesting to me. He was a student who was taking his finals. He had a panic attack and he called 911.
That idea.
That but he didn't know what else to do, right? So he called 911, and what happened? Cops came. Did they know how to deal with what he was going through? No, because they're not trained. What people need to understand is not that the budget is being removed. What you need to understand is they cannot be the first call for everything. What he really needed was somebody who knew how to deal with, a social worker or mental health expert, somebody that could actually help him. And instead, he was handcuffed, and that made his situation worse. And in those cases, what do? They take him in. And that's not what's supposed to happen. So I think it is essential that we invest, like I said, reinvest in our communities. We create enrichment programs, we create pathways in which people can actually, be more successful or have a path to success in their life that they want for themselves. And that could be, having more vocational, like, training programs. You have a pathway to give people skill sets, like, which is why I think what's important is also to invest in nonprofits that are doing the work in the community and having them expand their work into our community as well, right? So, for example, there's an organization called Hot Bread Kitchen that I've done some work with. And what I love about them is they are a kitchen based out in Harlem. But what they do is they bring in immigrant women. They teach them skill sets because bread is a big part of all of our communities and all of our backgrounds. So they teach them how to actually bake bread, and so that they've had this new skill set, and then they can go get jobs in professional kitchens. And so I think those are the things that we need to look at, is like, what is happening in our community? How can we put our dollars in their pockets so that they can continue to do the amazing work, create more community gardens, or create more places for individuals to actually have real growth, not just throw them into jail and not just put the budget into the NYPD. I'm a parent, and I keep seeing, I'm on the PTA and the SLT, and I keep seeing how there's so many parents that don't have access to technology, right? When it comes to devices or when it comes to Wi-Fi, something so basic, something that we think is in everyone's household isn't. And that needs to change. How do we actually make things more accessible? Because that's where we need to actually invest our dollars. We need to make transportation more accessible.
Yeah.
I had to travel 2 hours a day just to get to high school because that was the best high school that I could get into. And so I was traveling 2 hours to Brooklyn Tech, which is one of the specialized high schools here. And that in itself is not okay. Why don't we have enough good schools, public schools in our district, in our borough? And I think that's where I want to see money going, is investing back into our community and back into working families, people that need it the most, and make a more equitable city.
100%. And thank you for that beautiful answer, by the way, on defund the police. I think that the way you were speaking about that is exactly how I would want my elected officials to speak about the issue. And I think that you really, explained it well by, explaining the way that, not how cops are not properly trained in many instances to deal with mental health issues, and how, our communities are not being necessarily invested into the fullest extent, and often at the expense of those budgets. So, yeah, good answer. And my last question for you is just, obviously we're in very different, strange times to be running a campaign in. You mentioned in this little campaign video over here that Queens is essentially the epicenter of the COVID crisis. So what does that look like from a campaigning standpoint? Are you mostly focusing on social media outreach? Is there any door knocking involved? How are you making the connections necessary to get your name out? Obviously, you're on this podcast, so I mean, you're more innovative than your average candidate.
Yeah, I mean, so doing as much as we can from a distance, right? Which is unfortunate because I'm a person who loves to talk to people. I love to be in front of them. I love to have conversations. So I am phone banking the crap out of everybody, calling people as much as possible, getting them on the phone, getting them to talk about the issues, asking them what's most important to them today, asking how we can help. Just joining in on civic association calls, and just like wherever people are zooming within the community, just making sure we're in those rooms. I'm a parent, and just being as creative as I possibly can be. But door knocking again is at a minimum, just because with numbers going up in New York, we have to be careful, we have to be responsible. I don't want to be one of those candidates who's spreading. I want to be, as responsible. So just right now, we're relying on just being able to use digital as innovatively as we can, phone banking, and then obviously just being in places where people feel most comfortable with us, right? So if it's outside of a supermarket, trying to give out flyers to them, talking to them if they feel comfortable. But even then, right now, I think what's most important is that we all stay safe and we stay responsible, wear masks, social distance, and do our part in making sure that we don't actually make this worse, because, we're almost back at where we were in March, which is the most frustrating thing. And it's just like, we could get through this. I'm
Yeah.
talking to friends that live in other countries that are in a much, much better place. And yes, they've had second waves as well, but nothing compared to what we're going through. And I'm tired of patting people on the back for thinking that they did a great job. It's like, no, you need to keep continuing the work. It doesn't just stop because you saw some numbers change in the summer.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And Deepti, thank you so much for your time this morning. Really enjoyed talking to you, hearing your vision for this campaign that you're running. And I look forward to hopefully speaking to you again soon, hopefully with my co-host, Zach, maybe a little bit closer to the election.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate your time and just giving me space to be able to talk about me.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I really appreciate your vision. I think you're bringing a lot of really interesting experiences, insights, and just unique approaches to policy that I think are probably would definitely benefit the citizens of District 24. So if anyone's watching this and also likewise appreciates what you've said, where can people go to support you?
Deepti4newyork.com and then Deepti NYC on all other social.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, everyone make sure to follow Deepti and donate to her campaign. I'm sure she needs the support right now. Again, thank you so much for joining me this morning, Deepti. And if anyone's watching, make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and like I said, check out Deepti's social medias and her website so you can learn more. Thanks so much.
Thank you.